Good morning.
Good morning, John.
So far, it looks like it's just the three of us.
Yeah, everyone's starting to pour in.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Come on. Would you come in? Yeah. Argo, come on. Get.
Someone's talking to their dog.
Oh, sorry.
No worries, Brian. It was entertaining.
Sometimes trying to get a 180-pound dog to do something is challenging.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Sue.
Morning, Sue.
Morning, Sue.
A beautiful morning. Great to be with everybody. Just wanted to say, send my respects to everybody. Really happy to be here.
I want a cup of whatever you're having, Sue. Not that I'm not happy to be here. I'm just a little rough around the edges today.
Well, I just think the retreats with our board are some of the most productive and constructive times. And we don't often get a chance, just to have conversations. So it brings forward an opportunity that otherwise is less easy to accomplish. And so I'm really just expressing my appreciation and gratitude.
I think we can all agree.
This is Roger. I'm on my phone. My computer decided to start updating, so I'm waiting till it's done before I can get on a video.
All right. No worries. We still are waiting for board members to join us, but as we get started, I'm just going to make a couple housekeeping notes to chew up time. We have a number of slides available this morning. All board members should have received an email or two from Keith last night, including those slides. The slides are also now available on our website, amended to this agenda item under sort of board meeting documents. So anyone listening at home is certainly welcome to follow along. We're going to have 3 presentations and discussions as part of today's work. And I would encourage board members to think about downloading the slides, particularly for Forrest and Brian's presentations on fixed route and paratransit. They have a lot of great maps and tables that are going to be great visual aids, and you may wish to refer to them even once we've moved on to another slide. So I would encourage you to look at those slides and download them. You can download my slides as well, but they're not nearly as interesting as what Forrest and Brian have.
Okay. I think we've hit the 9 o'clock start time. This is Eric. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here. So why don't we get started? We have a quorum present. Since this is, kind of a meeting under the OMA, we need to kind of go through the formal process of getting the meeting going. So let's get started. This is the February 12th, 2021, board retreat, or at least the first half of it. It is open to the public. We have a quorum and we'll get started. The first item is to approve the agenda, which you have in front of you, or should have in front of you. If you don't have it, it was sent over last night. Can I have somebody move that into the record?
So moved.
So moved, Rich. Supported by, just speak out loud.
Support.
Support,
Mike.
thanks, Mike. Can I have, well, we'll just go down the list and appreciate and approve that with yes or no. Mike,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Jesse,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Kyra,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. Do we have Ryan yet? I don't think so. Ryan, are you on? I don't see you. Okay. All right, so that's moved. Next item is public comment. Keith, do we have anybody from the public who wants to comment this morning?
Thus far, we do not appear to have anyone from the public joining us.
Okay. Any general announcements from anybody? All right. Then we'll get into, oh, sorry, Kathleen, go ahead.
Sorry, I was not quick. I just I wasn't sure how many people were aware I've had a name change. So it only comes up as Kathleen Mozak because I am no longer Kathleen Mozak Betts. So just a general.
Okay. Thank you for telling us. Any other announcements? Do you want to announce anything about that shirt, Raymond, or are you just going to let it speak for itself? We'll just let it go.
On
He was-
gray days, you got to bring your own color. You know what I mean?
That's
Sure.
right. He was drinking the same thing I was this morning, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask. All right, we'll go into the retreat then. I think you got a draft retreat in which we will, I assume, generally follow. But 2.1 is long range planning, so we'll turn it over to Matt, and hopefully you got the retreat agenda, which is here. And I think we'll generally follow that. Am I right, Matt? All right, so I'll turn it over to you. You can get started.
Thank you very much. And I do compliment Raymond on his shirt as well. I didn't realize Jimmy Buffett was in town, but hey, why not? If Keith would be so kind as to allow me to bring up my slides, or maybe I do that. Okay. I hope you can all see the slide deck. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see it? All right, thank you. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I have a couple of housekeeping items I'll talk about, and then we'll get into it. One thing, Keith, Ryan Hunter is knocking on the door. He says his link isn't working. If you could re-email him the connection information to Ryan Hunter, help get him in. He's seems to be stuck in the lot waiting room. So housekeeping, we do have a full day's schedule today, but we do have breaks built in. So the first one is in about an hour and 10 minutes. So we'll probably stop part of the way through Forrest's presentation so we can all stretch our legs. I'll also note that all of you should have received emails late last night from Keith detailing or providing these slides as attachments. That's for your use. Particularly Forrest and Brian's presentations have a lot of great visual aids, maps and graphs and things that you may want to refer to on your own during the course of the conversation. So I'd encourage board members to download those files onto your computer, have a separate tab open so you can cross-reference them whenever you'd like. And for members of the public who might be joining us, all those slides are available on our website as part of the amended attachment for this retreat. So those are our housekeeping issues. One nice thing about the Zoom meetings is I don't have to tell you where the fire exits are or the restrooms are. So hey, at least there's that. Okay, so I want to thank the board for all the patience you've had really over the last couple years on the issue of long-range service planning. And that is what we're here today to talk about. So hopefully it's moved to the second slide now. So what are we here today to discuss? We're here to talk about long-range service planning. This is blue sky time. This is brainstorming time. What we're driving towards is a 25-year vision of transit services. So 2045 roughly, that lines up with the demographic projections that other agencies are using. So it's a convenient timeline. And it also breaks well into 5-year segments. So that kind of tells us about millage plans, and that leads to implementation planning. And this is probably going to be a 12-month process. We do have consultants on board. You'll be meeting them before long and working with them and us over the next 12 months on a variety of topics related to this. So really, we are at the beginning of this process. There's certainly a lot of public engagement that's going to be occurring over the next year as well. So we're really at the ground floor here. Now, the retreat today with the board is a big part of that. We wanted to talk to you right at the beginning, really for brainstorming purposes. We don't anticipate asking you to make any decisions today. I think it's too early for that. And we're really going to try to talk about more concrete things. You know, over the last year or so, we've talked about some fairly abstract concepts, ridership versus coverage, for example, in a abstract way. And I like to think of that as, you know, sort of the 30,000 foot view of things. Well, we're going to try to bring the plane down to maybe 20,000 feet today. We're going to get closer to actual services. You are going to see lines on maps, even if they are just conceptual lines. So we're going to get a little bit closer. Things are going to get a little more concrete. We're still going to bump into these abstract concepts and principles and priorities and things like that. But they'll be a little more perhaps relatable to things that we'd actually see on the street. Now, we are going to have a lot of time over the next year to talk about a wide variety of things. But we're going to start this process talking about, or focusing on, I should say, the two biggest parts of our business, the things we have to get right. And that's fixed route planning and paratransit planning. Together, these two things consume 99% of our budget and time. They produce 99% of our ridership and the impact of ability to get us towards achieving the ends that you've articulated for us. That's not to say that other things aren't important, and we will have time for them. But I liken this to a game of Tetris, if you like to play old video games, where you have two really big pieces that we need to get lined up in the best possible position. We have to make those things work. And then we can fill in, frankly, the smaller pieces around those big pieces when we've got them working properly. So we'll have time to talk about things like electrification and bike share and all those other things. And these retreats, frankly, we're only going to be able to scratch the surface in a lot of ways. But again, it's the beginning of the conversation. So agendas, this is a 2-day process. 2 half days, I should add. The retreats are going to look fairly similar. We're actually waiting to see what we hear from you today before we finalize any of the activities for the second day. So it's a little more general. Today, you're going to hear from me. I'll try to be as brief as I can about some introductions and considerations, some context for this. Then I'll turn it over to Forrest, and Forrest is going to walk you through some discussion about fixed route planning. Then, like I said, we'll have a break in there around 10:15. Then we will have Brian Smith will come and speak to us about paratransit, and then we'll have a wrap up. And during this time, we're also going to have kind of what I call a parking lot for all the other great ideas that you bring forward. We are going to have brainstorming opportunities. We're going to have dialogue. Yes, we have presentations we want to share with you, but we're also going to put you on the spot, make you answer questions. And we hope that that leads to dialogue and discussion about priorities and some of the trade-offs that we're going to be dealing with over the next couple of years. So a couple of considerations I want to give you to start with on this retreat day. The first question a lot of you might have is, what about the pandemic? It defines our lives. I'm talking to you out of a spare bedroom. This is not normal. So what about the pandemic? Well, I'm going to encourage us to adopt a bit of a post-pandemic mindset. We have to think beyond this. If we don't, it'll monopolize everything we talk about. We know some sort of normal is going to return, and it'll be a lot like the past, except for the parts that are different. But I can't tell you with any specificity what parts are going to be different or how much. We know some things are going to change. We know that telemedicine, telework, and telestudy are going to have big effects on commuting. And that's one of our main markets. How is that going to affect us? We don't know exactly, but we can make some educated guesses that, we have a very dense, hospital situation with limited parking. And so that's probably going to continue to drive in-person working, and there will continue to be a market for mass transit. The other challenge with sort of the pandemic is if we wait until all the implications of the pandemic are really clear, we might not get started for a couple of years. And at that point, we may be so far behind, we can't catch up. So we're going to need to assume a post-pandemic situation that's probably a lot like the past, except for the parts that are different. So this will come up in our discussions, but I'd encourage us to maybe think a little bit beyond it. Another thing, and this is more process for the work we're doing over the next year, it's sort of a question of shared steering. This is a real example of where the board and staff are going to be working together very closely for the control and direction of the process, of the planning work, and of the ultimate deliverables. So I'm going to take a few minutes here to reassure you as board members that you do have a lot of control over this process, even if at the moment under policy governance, approval of plans is technically delegated to me. I'm going to talk to you about maybe why we should reconsider that. So very quickly, for a project of this magnitude, we may want to consider whether or not the board needs to endorse or approve the final result. I'm going to raise that now and then table it for another day. You can jump off that bridge when we get to it, but it is very clear that the board needs to be bought into this. So we have to develop a plan that you all agree with as a body. So that much is clear. We're certainly going to be picking your brains, asking you for feedback, both as individuals and as a body during the course of this process. And you have a lot of, frankly, through your policies, very clear control over this process. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that now, but your ends policies, for all intents and purposes, are the goals. That is what we're trying to achieve. And your executive limitations policies really, in many ways, define the process that staff need to follow. So I want to talk just a moment about your ends. Your ends policies are the goals. Usually a planning process like this starts with a, sort of what are we trying to achieve? But you've done a lot of great work over the last 2 years to already have that conversation. And you've been fairly specific in your end statements. So just to recap what you've said in your end statements, you want the transit system to, I should say, increase ridership and social mobility, and improve the environment and help the economy and satisfy riders and residents and do all of that for value and wise stewardship of resources. These are actually really good goals. They're the kind of goals we would expect to have from a transit planning process. The only one that might be missing would be sort of an anti-congestion, traffic congestion one, and I'm actually very glad that you didn't put that in there. The challenge with these goals, as we've noted before in board discussions, is the sense of priority. We've said everything, and that's fine. And I could intuit a sense of priority based on the structure of your ends, but I don't think they're in any really ranked order. So we're going to, over the course of the next 12 months, starting in a moment, start to push you a little bit to give us a sense of priority. And this is going to be important because if we have 1,000 ideas that we want to do, over 25 years, we're not going to be able to do all of them. We're going to have some difficult realities of trade-offs and prioritization that we're going to have to grapple with. So as part of this exercise, starting today, but certainly not concluding today, we're going to push ourselves and you to give us as much clarity as possible about priority. I should also add that the end statements belong to the board, and you can change them at any time during this process. If you want to assert a certain priority, that's totally something you can do. So we've come to our first discussion point. We've come to our first opportunity to pick your brain. In a moment, I'm going to ask each of you, and give you 2 minutes. I'm going to ask you to look at this list. This list is all of your ends goals sort of broken down and made very short. And I'm going to ask you to choose your top 3. And then I'm going to make some chicken scratch notes here, and we're going to put the results up on the screen and hopefully have a very brief conversation about it. This is not a decision. I want to be clear with you today. This is a thought exercise. It's way too early on a Friday morning to ask you to make a final decision about something of this magnitude. And it's still abstract. We're going to have to wrestle with trade-offs and priorities throughout the course of this project. And some of them may not be clear until we get down into the 15,000 foot view of things. And I should also say, in reality, these priorities tend to bleed into each other. So expanding labor mobility, number B, or letter B, also tends to help D and C. We know that from a practical point of view, there's a lot of bleed over. But for the purposes of this exercise and making you uncomfortable on a Friday morning, I'm going to ask you to just be, not to overthink it. Just tell me your gut. What's your top 3 issues? And I'll put them in a quick graph if I can, and we'll see what the results say. And then I may ask some of you, why do you think you voted this way? Or what do you think this means? So let's start the clock. Does everyone understand the exercise? Any questions?
What's going to be the? I have a question. What's going to be the method for us reporting our priorities? Is it going to be a poll? Or are we going to be like reporting back to the group after we think about it, just verbally?
I'm going to go around the room and ask each one of you what your votes are, and then I'm literally just going to chicken scratch them on a pad of paper. But then I'm going to try to make a quick, pretty graph and put them on the screen. We are recording this session, I should note. So again, this is not intended to be a decision that you're making. You're not voting on it per se. This is a brainstorming exercise, an icebreaker to get the thoughts moving in the morning. Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, with that, let's start the clock, and I'll give you 2 minutes. All right, we got about another 30 seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's see. In no particular order, just what's on my screen, I will start asking board members for their top 3. So let's start with Kathleen. And please use the letters, I'm sorry. That'll help me make the right note.
ACE.
ACE, thank you. Mike.
Let me just say, because you said these are all, you mentioned that these are largely interrelated. I tried to concentrate on the broader ones. B, C, F.
Thank you. Jesse.
C, D, and F.
C, D, F.
Mhm.
Thank you. Roger. I hope you can.
I am just getting my video now. So,
Okay, I'll come back to you.
okay.
I'll come back to you, Roger. Sue.
ACF.
Thank you. Eric.
I have B, G, and H.
Ah, okay. I wondered if someone was going to pick H. I'm going to have to pick your brain about that one. Raymond.
You want what it is, or do you want me to describe the H?
I'll
come back to that.
I won't forget. I'll come back. Don't worry.
Okay.
Raymond.
F, A, and another H.
Ooh. A sense of discussion emerging. Rich.
I had F, E, and G.
F, E, and G.
Correct.
Thank you. Kyra.
I have B, C, and F.
B, C, and F. Okay. Roger, are you able to see it?
Yes.
Do you need another moment?
No, I think I've got it here. I'll go B, D, F.
B, D, F. And I see Ryan has joined us. Ryan, I hope you're able to see the information on the screen. Ryan, do you have top 3 from this list? Ryan, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Hello.
Okay, there you are.
Okay. Yeah, A, C, and G.
A, C, and G?
A, C, G, correct.
Okay. All right. Did I get everybody? I think I got everybody. Okay. So while we do that, we had 2 people mention they had H, which was other, and I believe that was Eric and Raymond. I'll ask them to maybe quickly explain what they meant or what they were expecting or what they were thinking there while I do a little bit of Excel magic. So please go ahead, Eric.
Sure. I mean, these are all very good goals. I just wanted to really kind of expand on the one in general, and that was F. I didn't think increase in ridership in general was specific enough. And so my thought was, while increasing ridership in general is a worthy goal, if it comes at the expense of, not using our money wisely, I mean, we could expand ridership by just giving away free rides, right? I mean, we could just give everything away for free and that would hugely expand ridership. I think we have to, but what I would, my other is really, and I don't have all the words really kind of fleshed out in a really concise statement, but really, I think it's a priority for us to be adaptable or flexible to the coming or future trends in mobility to adapt to the needs of the community to increase ridership. So, maybe that's part of what we thought was going to be in increased ridership in general. But a more specific goal for me is to be adaptable where we need to be to increase ridership in general. So if that means, a commuter rail, if in the future that became an actual viable option, that's what we would need to do. If it became, some other mode of transportation, some kind of, connector, some kind of hyperloop, some kind of whatever. But I think it's an important priority for us to remain flexible, to be relevant, to use Jack Bernard's old phrase, and adaptable to the needs of the population to increase ridership and make us an alternative attractive to the single passenger car or cars in general. So I hope you can capture that in some way, but the key words there are adaptability, flexibility, and meeting future needs, future trends and future needs.
All right, very good. Raymond.
Yeah, I want us to keep in mind that we are a transportation authority, not a transit authority. So what and obviously transit is our kind of core business, but I think sometimes we forget about the fact that we are more than just a transit agency. So really what H was meant to kind of get at is, and maybe even it touches on Eric's point about adaptability. It's just about mobility in general, right? So, we've had past talks about things like bike share or, kind of pilot shuttle sort of projects. And I just want us to continue to think through those as part of our solution set, because it can help us achieve all of the other goals that we've talked about without just using 40-foot buses. So it's really just about mobility in general. Maybe it's adaptability, but it's just about looking at the bigger mobility picture beyond just transit.
All right, thank you very much. So I've, through the magic of Microsoft Excel, managed to turn my chicken scratch into a professional looking graph of your results. And so you see how you voted here. The two biggest ones obviously were helping those who can't drive and increasing ridership in general, followed by labor mobility and environmental improvements, making wise use of money, and then customer satisfaction, helping car owners and others. So I'd like to hear from you, board members, just briefly. Either, does this surprise you? Do your collective results intrigue you? Do you have questions for each other about those? I think Sue had her hand up.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understood Eric properly when he went to his reaction to F. I think you maybe said, well, that could mean we just give away free rides as an example, right? And so that would be a way of increasing ridership. Did I hear you right, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, to me, we've talked a lot about the need to increase ridership, and that is something we need to do. But I've brought up this point in the past, which is, increase ridership responsibly and in a way that's self-sustaining.
Right.
So increased ridership in general is not necessarily a specific goal for me. It has to be something in general. And I think generally, if you look at our ends, increasing ridership is a big part of that, of course. But there's a way you can do it responsibly and not responsibly. Irresponsibly would be just to say, all right, well, we'll give every fixed route thing away for free, or we'll give all our paratransit away for free. That's hurt us insofar as we've kind of talked about as a group and as a board. The way we deal with TheRide and paratransit in general, it's just not sustaining over the long term. So I didn't want anybody to, or I just wanted to kind of reiterate the point that increasing ridership, while very important, in and of itself is maybe not, without more description or doing it the right way, I guess is a better way to say it.
Right.
It's not necessarily a worthy goal. And I just wanted to make sure my point was with kind of expanding that for my H is I want to increase ridership in a way that responds to the needs of the community and their future needs. So if that is fixed route, that's fixed route. If that's more something else, that's more something else, but it has to be sustaining, specific, and in a way that meets the needs of both the ride and the public.
Yeah, so I interpreted it differently, which is why I wanted to come back to your point, because my thought was increasing ridership actually means we can expand our service areas. So my interpretation, and I could have gone to H and said that more specifically, but I was interpreting one of the example outcomes under F is that we could actually continue to serve a greater geographic area and therefore have a greater impact in a larger zone. So it's just an example of when you have these very broad categories, right? Just to your point, my point as well. There's a lot of things drilling down under each of them. So that was one of the points I made, whether you put it under H or my assumption was F. Continuing to increase our service areas seems important.
And I think also that goes to my point, which is if we can increase ridership and do it the right way, insofar it doesn't hurt what we already do. So if we want to increase our geographic area, but it would be a drain on our resources to do it, or we couldn't do it responsibly, then that's not the goal, right? But if it would make sense to do it and it would serve the other ends and it would increase ridership and it would be sustaining on its own, then it absolutely makes sense. So I think we have two interpretations, both of which are very reasonable, but at the same time, I think both of our interpretations kind of work together.
And I'll add that you're just wait for us. We've got some more information on exactly what the two of you are discussing in just a few moments. But I want to give you all a chance to sort of ask each other some more. I think Raymond I couldn't tell because his shirt was obscuring all movement in the room. I wanted to just ask if you had something to.
Yeah, it kind of, I interpreted it yet a different way. So when I look at this list, B, C, D, and E all roll up to increasing ridership, right? If we expand labor mobility, that increases ridership. If we help those who can't drive, that increases ridership. If we attract car owners to transit, that increases ridership. And if we have the best damn service we can provide, and it's, the best deal on the market, we're gonna, through customer satisfaction, we're gonna increase ridership. So that's why F felt like the most global to me. I think, to Sue's point and Eric's point, you can also increase ridership by expanding your coverage area or, generating demand by decreasing costs for people by giving away free passes. I think that's also inherent in there. But that's why, to me, increasing ridership in general was kind of was the most encapsulating of all those identified. So just to muddy the waters for
point. And just a quick commentary, and then Jesse. Jesse, go ahead.
I really like this discussion because for me, this was really an exercise and like all of these things are related, but it's like, it seems to be like, what is your goal and how you want to we all seem to have a kind of a similar idea of like generally what we want to accomplish, and then it's like what do we want to focus on as the methods for how to accomplish that? So like I didn't say reducing an environmental footprint, even though that's really important to me, because like if we said reduce environmental footprint, well, we could electrify our fleet and then we are reducing the carbon emissions that we put out. But just having more people using public transportation instead of cars can also, that's my means towards the end of reducing environmental footprint. So this is all really to say it's interesting. They all seem to be getting towards a similar thing, as Raymond was saying, B, C, D, and E lead toward, promote F, but depending on what we want to focus on to achieve that, I think it seems like that's where this discussion is going. I'm really interested in it.
Absolutely, that's where we're going. Any other questions amongst each other? Because I want to keep us moving. All right. One thing I will point out about this result, Raymond's absolutely correct. A lot of things like labor mobility, car owners, those could all be dumped into increased ridership. But you can already see in this graph, their highest goals are increased ridership, which inherently means attracting markets that have an alternative and helping those who can't drive. Sometimes these two groups are referred to as captive riders and discretionary riders, and problematic terms. I don't necessarily like either of them, but Chris White, our former head of planning for many years, described this as dual roles for public transit. And every transit agency that I've ever seen struggles with this. We have a social mission to help people who are not able to use the dominant mode of transportation, which is a personal automobile, either from a mobility limitation, economic circumstances, or any other reason. And then all of the other goals that come from expanding beyond that market into other markets, which to Jesse's point, probably the best way we can clean the air is to get more people out of their cars, but that assumes they have cars to start with. So these are excellent points and just the beginning of the discussion. I am going to move us along here, talk a little bit more about a few other facets I think are important. Now, you set the ends policies that we just discussed, and those are our goals, and trade-offs are going to be a big part of it. But you also have a lot of other policies that I just want to touch on very briefly that really define, again, the roles that we have here. So staff are going to be working with our consultants, and we'll be doing the nitty-gritty on a lot of the plan. The board retains pretty much all authority to implement it. So you can change, you control the tax rate, the real estate decisions, debt, fares, construction, and the not insignificant matter of the annual budget. So when I said we need you to buy into this plan, that's what I meant. So it's definitely a joint exercise. You also have a number of policies that I'm not going to go through in detail, but they effectively define how we run a planning process like this. And I sometimes refer to this as the funnel. Your executive limitations put guardrails on what we cannot do. So just a couple of the points here, you have policies that say I have to involve the public, stakeholders, and riders in a planning process. I have to be transparent with clear information. I can't be disingenuous. We have to partner, collaborate, and innovate. We have to clarify assumptions, implications, and risks. We can't surprise you, obviously, I don't want to do that. But a big chunk of the planning related policies are going to be in section 2.4, which deals with financial planning and budgeting. You could look at that all day, but I just want to focus on a couple because I think they're important and they will have a big effect on how this plan shapes up. Just to summarize 2.4, it says we can't make unrealistic plans. We can't incur debt to fund future operations. We cannot, create obligations, expenses in the future that we know we can't pay for. So there's a number of things in there that are relevant to this that are going to force us to grapple with those priorities and trade-offs again. So this brings me to my third main consideration for this process. We're lucky to live in a community or communities with a lot of ideas, a lot of great ideas. If, you know, walking on the street and we ask the average Ann Arborite or Ypsilanti resident, you know, what do you think transit should do? We'll probably get 10 ideas. We're expecting a lot of ambitious, you know, sort of envelope pushing suggestions from you, from elected leaders, from residents, from stakeholders, from riders. And we're going to have to balance those with the realities of our budget and the realities of our situation. So we have political limits that we're going to have to acknowledge and grapple with. So bus lanes, dedicated bus lanes, are a great thing. They're increasingly popular and they're relatively cheap. You know, it's just paint on the street. But the political will to take a street lane away from cars and give it to buses is a big deal and a heavy lift. So we're going to have to acknowledge that. We also have, you know, reasonable financial limitations and questions about what's warranted. So we're going to have to, I think, recognize that, you know, our total community is less than 200,000 people. And certain solutions like subways, you know, big light rail systems that might work in cities of 2 million people or larger, frankly, may not be warranted or viable at a community scale like this. So we're going to have to filter and look at things in that regard. We have to acknowledge that even as we like to talk about a bunch of other stuff we want to buy, existing costs continue to rise, and that our organization only has so much capacity. How many construction projects could we undertake in a single year, realistically? So all of these things are going to intersect with all the great ideas that we're going to get. But we may need to prepare ourselves to say, you know, that's a great idea, but maybe that's for the future. Maybe that's frankly beyond what we're able to afford or deliver in the next 10 years. So maybe that's in year 15 of the project. Or
could I jump in real quick with a comment on this slide? The one of the things I think one question I'll have in mind as we go through these and we talk about our future direction and changes, and maybe other board members will have this same idea, concept, or question. As you mentioned earlier, you know, 99% of our effort, time, you know, expense goes into doing fixed route and paratransit. You know, to the extent that we want to go in new directions, and I don't want to really talk about this now, but I just want to plant the seed for a question so we can address it when the time comes later later this morning. One thing I'll be kind of gauging all of this in the back of my mind is, what is the tipping point financially that where it makes sense for us to go in different directions, expansion, et cetera? How do we begin to analyze those tipping points, and then how would we realistically redirect resources and take them away from what we do now to doing something different, to make that both a realistic goal and not a drain on our own resources as a organization? And if we did have to increase resources to go in different directions, how would we go about doing that beyond the, you know, either through increasing the pie of the current revenue streams or finding other revenue streams to cover those? So, you know, as we go through this, I'm sure, you know, you, Forrest, you know, Brian, others, maybe John will talk about this at a certain point. I just wanted to plant the seed, and I don't want to have a big discussion about it now because I'm sure that will come maybe on day 2 or what have you. But to the extent that you, Forrest, and others can address that and keep that question in mind as we go forward, I would appreciate that, because I'm very interested in what's the tipping point that says, yeah, this is the point where we're going to break, go this way or that way, and it makes sense that we can redirect resources to do that, to take things away from this and go over here and do that. So I hope that's not too confusing, but that's just, I'm thinking about that financially from a financial regular cost, you know, fiscal constraint point of view. I just wanted to bring that up.
we certainly will be grappling with that a lot over the next 12 months. Today, I simply want to introduce it as a theme that we will touch on. I actually don't want it to constrain this conversation too much. I hope, today we can be a bit blue sky and you'll be willing to put any idea on the board. That's where we're going to be starting with the public in a couple months anyway. But Eric is correct. At some point, the plane has to go from 30,000 feet to landing it. And that requires us to be pragmatic. So we will be returning to that, Eric. It'll be a theme through all the conversation.
Just to clarify, I'm not interested in the actual financial analysis. I'm just kind of interested in the concept of what would drive that tipping point for the ride when we go in these directions. What kind of guidelines are we using? What kind of thoughts, ideas, or planning would you be doing? So not necessarily the actual details of it, but just what are those tipping points, or what kind of things would you look for as a ride to make those decisions? That's all.
We will be bumping into those issues all day. Just to finish up here and move along, I'm already over time. So the plan that we're going to come out with here is what in the transportation world we call fiscally unconstrained. That means it's not restrained by only the money we have available today. We're going to leave it open. So if we want to imagine big expenses in the future, the plan will be able to accommodate that. But we're also going to have to be very good at prioritization and being pragmatic about things. Having a plan that, we approve that says we're going to put a round peg in a square hole that none of us, that we all know we can't actually do, kind of undermines the point of the plan. To Eric's point about money. So again, I don't mean to dwell on these things, but I do want to contextualize these discussions. Transportation is an expensive endeavor. When we look at just the capital funding that we, are pretty sure we're going to need, terminals and garages, for example, we're easily at $70 million in expected expenses already. When we talk about something like a bus rapid transit line, which we've done a study on, we know that the cost there is somewhere between $30 and $80 million. Now, we're lucky in the United States that the federal government will chip in, but realistically, we're still going to have to come up with 50%. The feds will only pay for half. So where are we going to come up with the rest of it? Tens of millions of dollars in capital. And then from an operating perspective, we need to grapple with the reality that we are limited to the property tax base by and large. And we certainly have the opportunity to ask for more money in millages. But to Eric's point, at some point there is a political calculation about, how much can we actually ask for when everyone else is asking for money as well? What will local taxpayers support? That question's downstream from today, but we wanted to outline for you just what different millage rates should do. 1 mil is 7 million, and you can, do simple math to get larger numbers. These are all ballparked, of course. 7 million is great, but it doesn't go that far, to be perfectly honest. So we could easily go into very high millage numbers for operating expenses alone. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. Again, not today. We're not going to be doing any calculations or math today. We just have to keep that in the back of our minds. So we've reached sort of the end of the beginning. My introductory comments, we talked about, this is a 25-year plan that we expect to be broken into 5-year implementation segments along our millage timelines. We're trying to think in a post-pandemic mindset, even though there's a lot of uncertainty. Your ends are the goals, but we're really going to be working over the next 12 months on the trade-offs and the priorities that are inherent with those decisions. Your policies largely define the process that we're following, and you certainly can change those or the ends at any time. And a big issue for us is going to be balancing our aspirations with a lot of realism, primarily financial, but also I would say political, and what this organization has the capacity to deliver. So with that, before Forrest starts, I want to take a moment and see if you guys have questions or discussions about any of the things we've talked about so far.
Matt, this is Rich. The last, I mean, overall, this is really great. That last bit is actually why I chose G as one of my top 3 priorities, because the ability to spend money wisely is really important from our the owners that we report to, and then the fact that, yeah, we are going to try and get another millage, and then majority of our policies are financially based, right? What you actually are measured by, a lot of it is based off of that. And so I thought that's something that we definitely need to make sure is top of mind for a lot of our decisions and plans that we come up with moving forward.
You're on mute, man.
I'm sure you all thought it was an improvement, actually. I was going to asking if anyone had any further discussion or comment, questions. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. We've got about 20 minutes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stop sharing if I can. If I can figure out, there we go. And we're going to bring Forrest up, and Forrest is going to lead us through a discussion of fixed route planning. Now, to Raymond's point, we have to remember that we are a transportation authority, not a transit authority per se. And we've already had a lot of discussions over the years about our multimodal nature. And certainly Forrest has space in here for us to consider other things other than sort of traditional fixed route planning. But however, we have to sort of sort out our traditional business, which is still, 90% of our budget, 99% of our riders, and there's a lot of ideas about ride sharing, for example, but we haven't seen it mass adopted by transit agencies. So it's still a work in progress. So all that we're going to have, and I'm also going to be keeping a sandbox of ideas that come up today, just to make sure we don't lose anything. So with that,
actually, Matt, sorry, do you mind if I interrupt here a second? Just for my sake, probably more so than others. Like I Googled definition between transportation and transit authority, and I'm not sure I 100% understand the differentiation between the two.
So I think what Raymond is alluding to is the idea, are we limited to just fixed route and paratransit service? If we are, then we're probably what you might call a transit authority. Whereas, can we get involved in other things? Bike share, car share, ride hailing, travel demand management, other things that go beyond the traditional fixed route bus service that are there to be more multimodal. And I think the board's already had that discussion, frankly. You've decided, as far as I know, to be a multimodal transportation authority. So I think Raymond was just reminding us to think outside the box. Raymond, is that fair? Okay. Jimmy Buffett says yes. Okay. All right. Any other questions before I turn it over to Forrest? Okay. Thank you all very much. Forrest, it's your turn.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Good morning, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? Good. Can you guys see my screen? Show a fixed route service planning? Great. All right, let's begin. My portion, like Matt said, is about a fixed route service, but I will probably touch on some other like mobility issues. The first one, we're gonna just review the long-range planning process. I think Matt already said something, but I was just going to give you a quick overview. Then I think by that time we should take a short break. Then when we come back, we'll review some background information and future needs. Hopefully that will give you some useful information to think about the service elements. So I really want to spend more time on the service-related conversations. So the long-range plan, as Matt mentioned, is going to be next 12, 13 months. We'll go through this planning process together. We'll develop a comprehensive long-range vision and a concept plan, or I would say network concept plan, and a framework that would include an implementation plan and a financial plan to achieve this vision by 2045. So this chart it may look familiar to you. You've been seeing some packages, including the committee meeting and board meeting. So as you can tell, the plan will include multiple opportunities for the board members to provide input, and also for stakeholders, public, for their feedback during the entire process. So this is also showing the 2022 millage plan. We will have to do it in parallel. So we'll, in next 12, 13 months, we'll develop enough details for the first 5-year plan, just for us to be ready for the plan and millage referendum. So we have, as you can tell, we have a very tight timeline for a long-range plan plus a 5-year plan. So we'll have to work with the consultants and the board members, stakeholders very closely, and then get this done by March 2022. So that's the part for the long-range plan. I just want to ask, before we go through, some background information, do you want to take a break now, or do we want to wait until 10:15?
Would you guys be interested in taking a quick bio break, maybe 5-10 minutes?
Well, we just go to 10:15 and we can take a break then.
Okay.
Okay, and then I'll continue. So this chart basically shows some trending lines for the last 10 years, ridership, service area population, and the service hours. I mean, this is fixed route service hours we provided. As you can tell, the service was expanded significantly from 2011 to 2016. I think about a 60% increase. And then as we expanded the service, that's through the last 5-year TIP. So we covered more service area, like a more population, and also there's growth in the service area. So 2020 is really not a good year to compare. So let's use the 2019 figures for this comparison purpose. So the population increased by about, I would say, 17%, while the ridership only increased by 9%. As we said before, the service increased by 60%. So the population increase lacks population. So sorry, ridership increase lacks population growth. Means transit share, market share went down, and then the ridership increase lacks the supply increase, meaning productivity went down. So this is now probably, as we all talk about the last quite a few years, this is not just a local issue, it's nationwide. So the last quite a few years, ridership has been going down nationwide. But anyway, so we think we can blame the lower fuel cost or easier access to personal vehicles. But going into some detailed analysis, we can tell, as part of a 5-year TIP service expansion, we expanded our service area to some lower density neighborhoods. The productivity was fairly low, as we all know. So that's kind of to give us a general idea what happened in the last 10 years. So let's look at this travel pattern map. I'm sorry, I only showed Ann Arbor commuting flow. As you all know, the most jobs, most people live in Ann Arbor in our service area. But this is a travel pattern map. I would just want to explain to you why we show a lot of maps, and this is only one of them. There are more maps down for the next few slides. So they're important for transit planning. When we talk about our goals to achieve ridership or economic or serving the commuters, so or even the social needs, we need to know where our main markets are and where the transportation needs are, so we can design services to better serve this market. So some things like where people live and where they work, where they travel, where the future growth is, and where no car or one car families are, and so on. They're important information for planners to know and analyze. So in the following slides, as I said, we'll look at a few things for today's purpose. Of course, the consultants for the long-range plan will review and analyze more information as part of the long-range planning process. So come back to this map. I'm not sure this looks familiar to you, but I'm sure Raymond can tell. This is one of the maps the city included in their transportation, the recent transportation plan. Unfortunately, I don't have the detailed, the travel pattern figures for this map, but I do have the 2016 figures from SEMCOG. So as you can tell from the table. So this will give you a general idea where Ann Arbor workers live and where Ann Arbor residents work. So information is also available for other places. I may be able to show you maybe later if you are interested. You can easily go on SEMCOG website and click on a particular community like Ypsi or Ypsi Township, Peacefield. You can see all those travel patterns, inflow, outflow, where people work and just for the work trips. But anyway, so look at this map here. So it's a bit of a surprise to me when I first saw this map. There's so many people, live in the city and work. Live outside the city and work in the city. As you can tell, that's probably over roughly 80%. But it's only about a 20% Ann Arbor workers live in the city. And most of them actually coming from the surrounding communities, including Peacefield Township, Ypsi and the Ypsi Township, and Scioto, Superior, Ann Arbor Township, and the rest of the Washington County. And then there are quite a bit from West Wayne County and Livingston County. And there are, on the outflow patterns, over 20,000 residents in Ann Arbor actually work somewhere else. Again, it's mainly the surrounding areas, and some do go to Wayne County and then Oakland County. As you can tell from the chart, Detroit is not a major destination for work-related trips. Looking into more details, we'll be able to design services within our service area and connecting to other places, possibly through park and ride services to increase transit use and reduce parking demand downtown and U of M. So that's general current travel pattern. So then, look at this. I would say this is more equity and opportunity map. This map was developed by Washington County, just benchmark opportunities in each community. So this index used 5 key data source, including health and education, job access, economic vitality, and neighborhood safety and stability. So let's look at it closer to our service area. The opportunity index, as you can tell, the darker red or brown color is very low in the southeast areas. And look at some details data. It does tell unemployment concentrated in these areas, and also educational attainment is lowest. African American population concentrated in these areas. So this map basically tells us, where the social needs are. From this map, we can tell mostly concentrated in the southeast area. So the next map showing SEMCOG projections for future population and jobs. I highlight Washington County and a few locations where the main growth will be by 2045. But again, we're looking outside of Washington County. Just for the legend purpose, I think it's too small to tell. The darker green means more growth, and the darker red is kind of a lost population. Similar on the right side, the map, darker blue showing more job growth, and the red showing job loss. Anyway, so look at on the left side, you can tell the population growth outside Washington County is more, on the West Wayne County and the Oakland County, Detroit, and Livingston County as well. Just from the number perspective, I'll give you some idea. There will be 43,000 more people living in Livingston County and 57,000 more people living in Detroit. And West Wayne County will add 30,000 more people. So the job growth area outside of Washington County, as you can tell, I highlight the Oakland County, and it's 45,000 more jobs. Detroit, 9,000, only 9,000 more jobs. Livingston County will add 7,000. And West Wayne County will have, 3,000 more jobs by 2045. Those figures, when I'm talking about those figures, they're kind of compared to today's figures. But of course, the map showing between 2015 and 2045. Anyway, look closely within Washington County. So you can tell, the main growth area is more in our current service area. And in the entire county, there will be 77,000 more people by 2045, and about a 20% increase. So, and then in our service area, when I'm talking about service area, I know it's not just a member of this authority. I include Peacefield Township and the Scioto Township because we provided some services there too. So in our service area, I would say there will be 45,000 more people by 2045. And most of them are in Peacefield and Ann Arbor. And some will be in the Ypsi area and the Scioto and Superior. And then as you can tell from this this map, South Washington County and North Washington County, just immediate adjacent to our service area, will be the main growth outside of our service area. So look at the jobs closely within Washington County, and then there will be more jobs by 2045, about 27,000 more jobs in Washington County. Of course, the majority of those new jobs are in Ann Arbor. I would say there'll be like 12,000 more jobs in Ann Arbor, and also some more jobs in Peacefield, in the Ypsi Township, and in Ypsi, in the surrounding areas. So that's where the job growth will be. And then this basically is showing the senior population.
Hey, Forrest, I have a quick question.
Sure.
On the job growth, just that slide. And this may be a little bit beside the point, but I think it's a little bit relevant. Any insight onto those 12,000 jobs, what kind of jobs those will be? Are those just by sector? Are those service sector jobs? Are those technology sector jobs? Do you have any insight into that, or just kind of round numbers?
Those are just round numbers for today's conversation.
Okay.
We can look into some details for sure. I would say, the consultants probably will look in a lot more details about those things. Where exactly those jobs could are located.
Okay.
And even going back, sorry, and maybe add a little bit more. Going back to the the population growth. So the city is looking into more details like related to the TOD conversation. So we'll be able to tell where exactly the growth will be. So we, when we design services, we can focus on those, higher density development, and the jobs, the same thing, for those jobs who, the transit can provide some access.
Okay.
So that's a really good point, Eric.
Well, and the reason I ask is, I mean, if those are service sector jobs, then these are people who have to actually go somewhere to be somewhere to do their job. Or, there's some other kind of job where they, they're working retail, service sector, somewhere where they actually have to travel and they're mobile, versus a technology sector job where people could work remote, or they could be in an office, they could stay at home, something like that. So I'm just trying to get a sense of that. That might be a detail worth drilling into at a later point. So that's all I was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. All right, let's look at the seniors population. As you can tell, the dark green means more seniors will be added in those communities, and the light blue is same as last degree, but it's an increase in seniors. And then, of course, we know, as the general trend, people are aging. The entire population are aging. So in our service areas in particular, I think there will be more, like 23,000 more seniors living in our service area by 2045. And that's over 60% increase compared to today. And in Washington County, 40,000 more seniors, and that's more than 70% increase. So, after look at all this basic.
Could I just jump in before we get it? Okay. Before we really get into the base service, I think it is 10:15 now, so this might be a good opportunity to take a quick bio break for people. And since we're going to get away from the charts and into a new phase of the discussion, this might be a good opportunity to break for a few minutes. So, any objection to that? All right. So I think we've got 10:15 to 10:25. So why don't we plan to be back at 10:25 and we'll resume on this slide, if that's okay. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, I think we're at 10:25, so I think we're all or mostly all back. So Forrest, if you want to resume.
Okay, thanks, Eric. All right, maybe before I go on, I just quickly ask if anybody has any questions about those maps.
I had a question. If I was looking at the population growth ones correctly, it seems like outside of Ann Arbor, they're predicting just in general, greater population growth outside of city centers than like in other cities. And does that seem like a good interpretation?
Just to clarify, Jesse, you're talking about outside downtown, like city centers?
Yeah, it's just
Within-
just noticing that there's just generally seems to be greater growth. They're expecting higher growth in the townships than in cities.
Yeah, I think in percentage-wise, yes, absolutely. But you know, if you just look at the number of people, actually, there's still, I would say, Peacefield will add more people in the entire township than Ann Arbor. But Ann Arbor still, I think it was 12,000 more people. I believe Peacefield has 14,000 more people. I mean, it will be like by 2045.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
Forrest, this is Mike. I've got one comment about your chart that says historical trends. If you wanted to go back to that. Yeah, and I very much understand that we are talking about long-range planning, long into the future and into the future. This chart is really looking into the past, but I think it's really important long-term and shorter term when we're like thinking about the next millage renewal to understand the huge difference between the growth in the service hours and the lack of growth in the ridership. Not only geography, you know, but the makeup of the individual riders. I mean, we just really have to understand this because it certainly has relevance in terms of going forward from today into the future. And it also is very much important in terms of our next millage request, because that's obviously a huge issue. I don't want to, I'm not saying we should discuss this now by any means, but I just wanted to point out that it's really important to understand the divergence of those lines.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for the comment. Actually, we do have a short question later in the presentation related to that. All right, let's move on to more maps. Okay, so hopefully by now we have, we all have some basic understanding of where people live and work, where the social needs are, I mean, in general, where the future growth will be, and where the population are aging. So with that, let's look at where we are today, where we will allocate our resources in the future in order to meet those needs. And this is a map just showing, the pre-pandemic service, very high level. So there's a regional connection to Detroit and the airport, and there are high frequency corridors connecting some key destinations. And there are also local fixed route service and a flex ride service for providing basic service coverage. And then, as we all know, we had some financial challenges. We also have some operational issues, such as the service reliability or some routes with a lower productivity. So even just to maintain the status quo, try to maintain the current level of service for the people in the future, like by 2045. So we will need to address those issues, and even keep up with population employment growth. as well as the aging population, social needs, and we'll need more services like more buses, more capacity. Like if you look at this slide, basic tells us, with those new services, more buses means more garage space, more terminal space, and more service hours. And then, without additional space, we cannot just simply increase peak hour fixed route. I wouldn't say we cannot. It's going to be challenging for sure. So this capital project become kind of an essential components for further increase of fixed route services. And then, beyond that, we have a long list of things, and, I think all in your mind or our customers' mind or community, and they all have they have asked us for before, or, we heard about from some conversations or from previous studies. So those are just the kind of a list of things we could do. As Matt said, we don't want to put a financial constraint here, but I just try to simply list things we have known. Let me just quickly go through it. Longer service hours. You heard about earlier morning or later evening, night service, and better weekend service. And there's of course the additional service area for coverage. And then, as you can tell, the growth area will be surrounding our current service area, and there will be a need for additional service. And then when we talk about higher order transit corridors, we can touch that on later, and a higher frequency transit corridors for increasing ridership. And then regional express service, as you tell, combined with park and ride service, will serve those commuters. People leave outside the city and coming in for employment. And then, of course, there could be new terminals and not just the existing DTC, YTC. I remember in one of the board meetings, we mentioned Briarwood, in the future development as part of the city development plan, and there will be probably significant new development in that area, or maybe North campus related. And then, of course, overall, the improved terminal and stop amenities. So the first one I wanted.
Forrest, could I interrupt for a second? I understand all of those enhanced services, I think, other than high order transit corridors. What does high order mean?
Okay, Mike, let's get on this slide. I will talk a little bit more about it. Okay.
You're answering my question. Thank you.
Sorry for the new term. High order, typically we reference to, BRT, LRT, or subway, or, those are giving them higher priorities. It's not just the service, it's sort of with some infrastructure support. In this case, we're talking about the BRT, as Matt mentioned. As probably you can tell from the previous studies, we had a connector study a few years ago. It came out probably the initial capital investment would be around $600 million. We all know that this community cannot afford it. So we more focus on the bus technology on this slide. So we call higher order transit corridors, and there's still different options. There are full BRT with dedicated bus lane, and then with queue jump lane, we call it the BRT light version. Like it was queue jump lanes at the key intersections, and it was signal priority, improved bus stop loading, and then also you can put a more I would say I wouldn't call it a high order transit, but it could be a variation. Like you put a more express service overlay with improve the local services. Provide more services at high frequency, higher speed, I would say. So those are options, but even we talk about the full BRT, as Matt mentioned before, for example, on Washington Avenue, it's going to cost probably $10 to $15 million per mile. And then BRT Lite with queue giant planes, with signal priorities, would cost about, $3-4 million per mile. If we only do the express policy, enhance the local, that only need additional buses and a little bit improvement on the bus stop related. So, for this slide and some following slide, I'm not saying we're recommending this. It just, like I said, based on what we heard before, show you some different like a type of a service, could be provided in this community, and based on what we heard before, based on some previous studies. But anyway, so those are just for a very initial, try to encourage some conversations about it. A lot of more detailed work need to be done by the consultants during this next 12, 13 months. So certainly, by end of this process, you look at things maybe quite different from this. And this is only based on, like I said, the connector study, the Washington BRT study we had before. So the key, is to improve speed, frequency, and make it very attractive service, and of course for ridership purpose. So I just want to, before I move on, I just want to say, I highlight in green, like a little bit shaded green in downtown or U of M campus area. So those are just show you maybe where we talk about some bus only lanes, aside from the BRT corridor, where the congested in the city streets, and we can put some bus lane or some different priority matters for speeding up our buses and more reliable service. And in EPC, I still have a little dot there, and then the idea is to have maybe bus only access or exit from the terminal or a portion of the street, and just try to make sure our services are more reliable. So this is a kind of the concept for higher order transit corridors. Of course, eventually we may just call it BRT corridors. So I just want to ask, anything you think, more corridors should be this type transit service, or some corridors may not make sense on this map. Just very quickly, and to see if there's any questions or discussions about this slide.
I have a quick question for Raymond. Are the signature corridors from the city's planning, are these consistent with those, or would we not think about any of those being compatible with the intent of this graphic?
Yeah, I don't have those committed to memory, but if you remember correctly, Sue, they are. I know, Washtenaw through Reimagine Washtenaw and Plymouth are definitely high on the list, and then a southbound one as well. So yeah, from recollection, this seems consistent.
The only reason I ask is I thought at one point Stadium going a little further west was part of those corridors, and this may just be suggestive, so it may not be trying to be too literal, but I just.
No, you're not wrong, Sue. When I was on the planning commission, that Stadium Western out to Scioto Township was also part of it. So it was these three plus the one you're thinking of. So that has been discussed at the city level. At least it was when I was on the planning commission years ago. And maybe it's not as Forrest defines it, high order transit corridor. I don't know, but yeah, it used to be on that, and that used to be part of the city's master plan.
I only mention it because it's certainly an area of proposed density and draw. So it's just a random comment.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, go ahead.
When you look at these very high order transit corridors, which I assume would have very frequent service, we still have a lot of routes that go into one or the other transit centers. What about using these, I think Matt and I talked about this, or calling these spines and then ribs, where you have every mile or so a major station where routes, and not necessarily just fixed routes, feed into this so that you have transfer points. So instead of trying to bring a lot of buses into the center, into the Blake Transit Center or into the Ypsi Transit Center, you have feeders into these corridors, and they wouldn't have to necessarily all be fixed route. They could be flex ride, Uber, Lyft, bikes, scooters, whatever. Park and ride lots, put some ride drop-off stops, to reduce the number of routes going into and trying to limit the routes going into the center cores just to the high order transit core. Does that make any sense?
Sorry, Roger, I didn't catch the last part. So the other connections, you're talking about mobility hub concept?
Yes.
So other services feeding into this higher order corridor services?
Instead of having the hub and spoke where you have a lot of different routes going into the center core, you have the routes on the outside feeding into the high transit corridors for the transfer at that point. So
right. So a bit, sorry for interruption, Roger. I think you're talking about kind of a grid-like system. Is not only connecting to the hub alone, maybe connect to some transfer point. Yes, if we have a very high frequency service along those corridors, you know, those local buses or other, you know, first mile, last mile options, other alternatives can definitely connect to some key points, transfer points, because where they can transfer, like, you know, they don't have to wait, you know, every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, there will be a bus. Definitely that'll be the concept for, you know, one of the concepts for network design.
Along that same vein, is there, I know you're getting to the high frequency corridor slide next, but can adding more service on the high frequency corridors that run, like, I guess maybe, I'm always thinking about the Ypsilanti Ann Arbor connectors, and we have several routes that do that, like in particularly the 5, like, would potentially increasing frequency and making more direct routes with that run parallel to those high frequency corridors potentially achieve the same results that like bus rapid transit might?
Good question, Jesse. I think that really we have to look at the travel patterns. If most people just from one point to the other, like from Ypsi to BTC or the hospital, even university area, and that will be achieved. But if more people coming along that corridor, so we'll have to provide, you know, equivalent higher frequency along each corridor. But that's definitely will be considered, you know, based on the demand, you know, how many buses we need to run within an hour, you know, how frequent we're going to run on each corridor to meet the projected demand. But I want to go back to Roger's point. I think, you know, a lot of large systems, so with the grid system, they all run very frequent services along those corridors. People can transfer. I think the challenge for local connecting higher frequency corridors is easier to do one-way connection. You know, you go into transfer from local service to high frequency because you don't have to wait. But the other way is a little bit challenging unless our bus is running reliable, because if we miss a local connection, they will have to wait for a half hour or something. But we'll definitely work for, you know, more the on-demand service alternative. You know, whenever you get there, and a vehicle will be there waiting for you. I think, Roger, if I remember correctly, you and I had a conversation a couple of years ago, you know, about a BRT or LRT. So given we're talking about a year 2045, I would assume, by then autonomous buses will be available, or at least, if we have a dedicated bus lanes, certainly it's going to be operational. But anyway, so even going to the hub spoke system, one of the concepts could be, the local buses will run to the YTC or BTC will continue along those corridors, and then people don't have to make a connection. And then, the lower frequency local will form to a higher frequency corridor, from 30 minutes to every 5 minutes or something. Similarly from downtown BTC to CCTC, I mean, central campus or hospital, the service can be designed in different ways, but that's just one way to do this, either to replace hub and spoke or as an alternative for hub spoke system. But anyway, so there are a few concepts we can use for network design, but that's a really good point, Roger.
Hey, Forrest, I'm going to jump in here and just give you a time warning. You probably got a half hour to continue this conversation. It's a good conversation, but I want to make sure Brian has enough time on the back end to discuss paratransit stuff. So let's shoot for maybe another 25 minutes. And I don't want to shut down the conversation, but we'll have lots of time over the next few months.
Okay, thanks, Matt. All right, if there's no more questions, let's move on to high frequency corridors. So the difference between this high frequency corridors is more like this is a service enhancement, provide every 15 minutes or better service along those corridors. And you probably heard a lot about ridership versus coverage. And this is one of the key components can attract more riders, have a reliable network of high frequency corridors. So people can walk a little longer to access more reliable frequent services. So this is going to show you a network. Don't take too serious on those lines. And like I said at the beginning, and this is just showing the basic coverage where we can go with high frequency network. But I do want to mention, the park and ride service as we know from the previous slides, the commuters, a lot of commuters coming into the city from outside city boundary. So those park and ride lots, and some are existing, some are just a dot I put on the map and show you where that could be, and just for discussion or for park and ride, potential park and ride locations to accommodate those commuters. So before I go on, I will still ask the question, if there's anything missing or any different ideas you want to give us feedback on. Okay, let's go on for the local service coverage. Even I shaded in a different color, but don't worry about it. Local service, I know this presentation is focused on fixed route, but I want to touch on that. It doesn't mean local service has to be provided by fixed route. Going back to Roger's point, it can be share ride, it can be anything, scooter sharing program or bike sharing, as Erica mentioned, the mobility, or a few of you have talked about it. But anyway, so this just to show you, if the demand is high, definitely the bigger bus makes more sense for efficiency purpose or cost purpose. But flex ride can cover a lot of other surrounding area. I think it was a little bit lower density. But as you can tell, this service coverage area is expanded. But just show you, in order to meet some growth, like population or job growth, as we can tell from the previous maps, and I just shaded some areas where I see fit. That doesn't mean this is recommendation to expand service area, but that's just for discussion. I think this, like a local service, and there is still different concept like the network design or different frequency or service hours, the longer service hours or weekend or all these things will be touched on as the whole package going forward. And then let's move on next. We talk about a lot of regional connections, the needs for commuters or other purpose, trip purpose regionally. So look at this potential, connections, and that does include express and park and ride service as well. So in addition to Detroit and the airport connection, I put more lines there. There are additional connections to south and north as we talk about. There are more growth in South Washington County and of course north and including the Livingston County. And then the West Wayne County connection, not only to Ann Arbor for commuters going in, and also for people in Ypsi, because we, as you can tell from the social needs map or opportunities index map, there are a lot of needs in those areas. By connecting to West Wayne County, will provide access to more jobs and more opportunities. Hopefully that will increase the opportunity index there. I just want to mention that, this is great for labor mobility and then of course for the environmental goals as well, but it does require some difficult intermunicipal agreement. And of course we have to work with U of M because a lot of commuters are coming to the campus as the employee for, hospital such as. So talking about the regional connections, I want to ask again, anything I'm missing or anything you want to talk about here? All right. Now,
well, just to clarify, we've got A2 or D2, A2, D2. We've got our kind of those look to be intra-regional. We're not going to have a debate or discussion about wider regional connections at this point, but at some point, I think probably when we talk regional people, let's clearly define what we mean by regional in the future. So if we're going to talk about possibly what could come down the road in terms of a wider regional inter-county type region and how that may affect this. I know we're just talking about our kind of own intra-regional connectivity, but at some point that might, I just want to make sure we're not going to confuse the terms in the future.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So as we talk about, we covered fixed route services, but there are a lot more to consider as part of this long-range plan, I would say. We talk about a lot as integrated mobility. Are we going to be just fixed route service provider? We do have a scope to cover other alternatives. As you probably heard the term mobility as a service, it's pretty popular these days, but most transit systems still, operate more on a fixed route service, and with some new ideas coming in. But then we talk about mobility hub concept, with integrated all the mode access, and the TOD related, and the autonomous vehicle technology. And when I say integrated transit control system, that's more related to, in the future. So all cars can talk to cars and can talk to traffic control system. And then the traffic center, the control center will know where the traffic are and how to, manage traffic in a way, and even buses, and in making buses going to, a shortest path, for example, from point to point B, more information on those things. But again, it's in the longer term. So in the near term, there's a fare collection technology, touchless, and also the alternative propulsion system. For example, the electrical buses. We talk about, I think before maybe mentioned some non-emergency medical transportation, expand our scope as possibility there. and also new members. So those are kind of expansion of our geographic area, service area. I have 2 more slides, actually 3 more slides, but I have 2 questions to ask, similar to what Matt has done in his presentation. But my hopefully is much easier because I only have 2 choices and you can only pick one. So we talk about a lot, you know, ridership coverage, and then now the service area expansion. Either we want to expand our geography area, or we really want to concentrate the resources in our existing service area.
Yeah, you're right, Forrest. This is a much simpler question. You're right.
That'll be good. So I will probably give you 30 seconds to think about, or maybe a minute. Maybe give you a minute to think about it. Then I will come back and ask Ron, see what your answers would be.
I'd like to provide a little bit of context while you think. When I interviewed for this job in 2015, I spoke to sort of the wise old man of transportation in Southeast Michigan. And he told me then that the ride kind of had 2 paths it could consider. It could continue to try to expand our footprint, or it could intensify our services within our existing service area, but we probably couldn't do both. And whether or not that's true, I'm still not sure, but I thought it was a good way of framing a question for us about our priorities. So that's the intent behind this question.
Well, I mean, I guess that goes to the point I'm making about the joke I made about the not so simpleness of this, which is if 6 years ago it was brought to your attention and you still don't really know where you fall on this issue, then I mean, we're still going to be a house divided on this, but I think it's important to get a pulse of the board right now. So let's take the poll. You know, we'll do the poll right now, but I think this is a very fluid, evolving issue. But yeah, let's go through the exercise.
Okay, I think 1 minute is up. I believe so. So let me go through. I will ask around, not in particular order, but in the order of I put in an Excel spreadsheet. So I will ask Eric first. Probably you're ready to.
Yeah, I mean, overall, since the context of this is thinking in the post-pandemic world, you know, I think if we, you know, kind of, I don't think that these is number one binary choice is number one. And post-pandemic, I don't think we can afford to think of these as binary choices. I think we sort of thought we could do that in past retreats and think of this as sort of a binary decision, or more or less it's going to really be heavily one way or the other. I'm not sure we can afford to do that. But if I have to pick one over the other, I would pick B.
So you pick B?
Yes, B, a very qualified B.
Okay. And then go to Roger.
Also pick B.
Okay. And Kathleen.
I was leaning towards B, but I have A anxiety. How's that?
Sorry, you have to pick one. No,
I know.
kidding.
So I guess my gut is B, but when I think about equity and inclusion and Ypsilanti and Ypsilanti Township and other areas, I lean towards A, but because of where we're at right now, B seems to be the priority.
Okay. Thanks. Raymond?
Unequivocally B.
Mike?
Also B, and I certainly include Ypsi and Ypsi Township in existing service area.
Yeah, just for clarification purpose, our existing service, like members of this authority, and our Ypsi and Ypsi Township. Sue?
I'm sorry, Raymond, what was your answer?
B.
Thank you.
Sue?
I also pick B, but under duress. Because I don't like having to make the choice, but if I did, it would be B also.
Okay. Sorry to make you make the choice. Jesse?
So with choosing my understanding of what B means, and I'm choosing to believe that an increasing service coverage within the existing service area as part of B. And also, I think, so there's that, and also the importance of having connections to outside our current service area. So with those as a given component of B, I'll choose B.
Okay, thank you. And then Ryan?
Yeah, I concur with everyone else. B, but I would like there to be continued conversation around A, if possible. I like what Jesse said. So, yeah, B.
Thank you. Kyra?
I'm also a B.
Good, thanks. Rach?
Oh, so you're gonna make me be the tiebreaker, huh? I'm gonna go with B, but I agree with what Eric and others have said, that it's making this very binary, makes this difficult, but I will definitely lean toward B.
Okay, wow. Good. I try to find my other PowerPoint. Okay, that's pretty, I mean, we're unanimously B with some condition. Certainly those are valid points. Like in the existing service area, you know, where the priorities will be, that would be another question. And then that kind of lead to the next question. And there's still similar, I think, relate to ridership and coverage, but there are like 4 and plus other choices. So the number 1 is keep the same tax rate, but cut underused routes and transfer resources to get more riders. And with the understanding those underused routes may be, you know, kind of serving a social need. The reason we keep them there is for those social needs. And then B is keep same tax rate and cut ridership routes to expand social needs, basically just shifting resources from ridership to coverage. And then C, increase tax and keep social needs routes and put new resources into growing ridership, you know, those higher frequency corridors or higher order corridors. And then D, increase tax and spread resources evenly between, you know, ridership and coverage in this case, or higher used routes and less used routes. So then, of course, this time I give you a easier option. You can choose E. So, and tell us what do you mean about, you know, E. So I know this is probably a little bit tougher than the first one. I'll give you a couple minutes. I know we're running a little bit over, but I think we can afford a couple more minutes on this question. Okay, you have about 24 seconds, 20 more seconds. All right, are you ready?
Sure.
So I see a head nodding from Rach, so I'm gonna go Rach first.
You didn't like my tiebreak last time, huh?
Right.
I am going to go with C.
Okay. Good, thanks.
Uh-huh.
And then Kara?
I'm also a C.
Good, thank you. Ryan?
I'm feeling a little bit torn. So, oh, C.
Okay, thanks. Jesse?
I'm an E.
Okay, probably I'm gonna come back to you, Jesse, about some details. And then Mike? Oh, Sue, sorry, Sue.
I'm sure if I had time, I would be at E and I would have a better developed alternative, but I can't really put it together that fast, so I'll stick with C.
Thank you. Mike?
E.
All right, we'll come back to you, Mike, for some additional information. Raymond?
Okay.
I'm a C, but caveated. I think there's more than just tax rate. I think there are other ways to.
Okay.
So, but C.
Good, thank you. Kathleen?
I am also E as an elephant.
Thank you. We'll come back to more details. Roger?
C.
Sorry, C?
C is in cat.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Eric?
I'm an E.
All right. So we got it. Actually, right now we have 6 C and 4 E's. So I'm gonna go back to Jesse for additional information on his E.
Like Sue, I think I could spend some more time developing this thought, but I would say increase the tax rate. But what bothers me is that this question is treating our service as siloed from the other elements that are playing into it. So my thought, what I wrote down was increase, but allocate resources to community development where the ridership and coverage needs can be met by the same services. So like finding ways where we can have a greater influence on developing those social needs in high ridership areas. Like what if there was more housing and healthcare and shopping available on the Washtenaw corridor? We could increase ridership, and as long as there was affordable housing also on there, those people could be met by a lot of the same services as ridership. So so maybe increase, but focus on ways in which coverage and ridership are not necessarily competing with each other in a social context.
That's a great point. Thanks, Jesse. Then go back to Mike.
Yeah, mine would be similar to D, except I really don't like the word evenly in that. And so I kind of have a modified D, increased tax rate, put more into both high use and less use services, but I would, of that increase, I would put more of the dollars into the high use than the less use service.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks, Mike. And then Kathleen?
So Matt encouraged us to think pie in the sky, and I want it all. I was leaning towards C, but I also think that we need to be mindful of high use services as well, not just new resources and social. So yes, I want it all.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. We want all. I think if we go out and ask community, they would tell us, yes, we want everything. But we don't want to pay more tax. All right, and then Eric.
All right, I've got a combination of A, C, and F. So under A, I would, let's cut underused ridership routes, underused routes. I will also want to do C, not necessarily, partly to increase some social routes, but redirected as appropriate. But also I'm thinking about capital spending in the future and our need for more funding to do capital projects. You know, what we've run into with the YTC here is we keep going back, trying to get the money to finish that off. We can't seem to do that. At least it's going to take longer than we thought. We need to deliver on that project. And so I'm thinking about C in terms of capital projects, capital spend, you know, getting people in and out and around our downtown core areas where the growth and the jobs are going to be. So a combination of A, C, and then F, to Raymond's point earlier, I've got an F, which is, you know, let's, instead of thinking about this, again, this kind of binary thing, increase the tax rate, don't increase the tax rate, let's think about expanding the pie altogether with more equitable fares and fees, and then, you know, pushing on whatever leverage we can do with our state funding, if that means we have some kind of regional approach in the future, but you know, to the extent that we can rely on government partners or private public partnerships in the future to expand our pie, we need to think about doing that. And let's not cut ourselves off in the future. And it's not, you know, totally out of the necessary, but you know, we can't think about, we can, you know, think about using debt as a tool, you know, revenue bonds or whatever in the future to expand our coverage, expand our capital assets, et cetera. So I think I want to put another category as F, meaning just like, let's increase the pie instead of, you know, altogether through other things other than the tax rate.
All right, good, thank you. I'm not gonna put this chart in a PowerPoint because it's so simple, like 60 and 4E, and some are related to C, back to C. Anyway, so that'll be my end of my presentation. I just wanna, you know, the last slides, I wanna ask everybody, you know, what issues, you know, in your mind we haven't addressed and you wanna address, you know, and then what services, you know, infrastructure, new ideas you'd like us to consider for this process.
I think one of the things that I wanted to address was kind of what I touched on in my answer is that what capabilities do we have to expand our influence in the community outside of just transportation services, but you know, to a larger community development standpoint, because we've got so many issues that are tied together, you know, housing being a very obvious one that we don't have any direct ability to influence right now. And so being able to allocate resources to increasing that influence.
Great. I took a note. Thanks, Jesse. Anybody else?
This is Eric. I just, to the extent that, and I appreciate all the time and the effort that went into this, to the extent I think in the future that we see any trends getting away from some of the other trendy things in transit or transportation in general, future services, diversification of services, other multimodal approaches, and where we see that going over the next 25 years, which is a long time. It'd be interesting to see where we were 25 years ago to now, and then how we see those trends going from now until 25 years in the future. Getting your take on that would be helpful, and then layering on top of that the other point I brought up several minutes ago or a while ago, which is what's the tipping point where we say, similar to one of the automakers saying, all right, we're going to put resources into electrification and we're going to make electric cars going forward, and that's going to be our business model. What's that tipping point for us in terms of driving a new direction for any future trends?
Good. Thank you, Eric. Roger?
Well, we touched on high capacity corridors, but I think we just really touched the surface of that. We need to think about the political implications of that primarily, because that's going to be a big political hurdle to get over. And the city is starting to look at transit-oriented development, and we ought to be in the middle of that discussion. Because after all, we're a transit company, and they seem to be, starting a process without the key element being us involved in that process. So I would say that high capacity corridors and integrating that with the politics is something that's probably a top priority for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Roger. I think we don't have any dedicated transit, like a lane or even something in signal priority. I know we've been talking about it for many, many years. I hope we can start soon, even as a pilot project, working with the city.
Just point out on William Street, there's a dedicated bike lane now on William Street, which is great. But one bus, I drive down William Street almost every day, and there's probably one bus would hold as many people as bike on that, certainly during the winter. And maybe two buses would hold all the bikers during the summer. So there's been political will to dedicate lanes. We just have to orient that more to transit.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I know I'm a little bit over. Sorry, Brad. You got a little bit short time. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to hand over to Brandon.
And I'll jump in real quick just as a segue. Thank you, Forrest, and thank you, everyone. Again, we're just starting a conversation, and if you're like me, as soon as we hang up here, you'll probably have 5 more ideas that you wish you'd shared. Please make notes, email them to Forrest directly for things you'd like us to take into consideration. So with that, initially we had scheduled a micro break a little while ago. I just want to sort of check in, maybe thumbs up or thumbs down. Do people want to take a very brief break before we jump into the other deep end of the pool? Okay. May I suggest, well, I'm seeing mixed reaction. May I suggest 5 minutes? Mr. Chair, if that's okay, and then reassemble.
Yeah, a tight 5 minutes, and then we'll get back together. Thank you.
We'll see everyone at 25.
Matt, should I queue up my slides, you suppose? Okay.
Eric, I'm back with my cat.
This is the dog cat.
I'm back with my real cat.
Can I turn on the cat filter and be the lawyer who's the cat?
Yes.
I'm not a
I can do
cat.
the entire presentation as a cat.
I feel unprepared suddenly. Unequipped.
Okay. Mr.
Whenever
Chair.
you're ready, Brian.
Okay. So before I dive into this, I want to give a couple of caveats. The first is that I'm going to zoom through the first two areas of current challenges and next steps and really try to focus on the now what, because you've already seen current challenges and next steps, and we're a little short on time. So if I go too fast through those, know that I'm available to answer any of the questions, and it's all based off of the paratransit study. And then just to make my boss a little anxious, I actually added a slide or two while we were talking because I wanted to have my own quick polls. I just had them verbally and I thought, I really needed this slide. So I added some on the fly there, Matt. So with that,
I will compress my wrap-up session to whatever time is left over. So
okay,
go for it.
So with that, if you'll recall, the paratransit study did point out that we had a problem with our rising costs. You can see front and center here that our costs were rising beyond our ability to continue to pay for them to the point that, and this only goes 7 years out, but it was swallowing up almost the entirety of our budget and was predicted to go even higher than this if we didn't make any changes. One note about this is that this slide is pre-pandemic. We have reduced service at the beginning of the pandemic. We have suspended TheRide and same-day ADA trips and have held those as suspended to date. And while we reduced our fixed route coverage, we did not reduce the TheRide footprint during the pandemic. We have kept this same footprint so that service was uninterrupted for all of these folks. However, that led to us having taxi-like service on a shared ride budget and has continued. We have one of the highest costs per passenger trip among our peers, yet have one of the lowest passenger trips per hour among our peers. We also had identified some internal opportunities to improve efficiency. We actually achieved all of these during the pandemic. So I've added little check boxes to each of those. And come to next steps and where are we at, a clear path forward. So one of the elements that we had been talking about prior to the start of the pandemic was the need to separate out required and premium services. And the pandemic actually allowed us to do this in part because of just I'll use a term I haven't used in a while, unprecedented situation of the pandemic. And in part because our contract with RideCorp ended, we separated out ADA service from all of the rest of the services that we offered. The other thing that we did, and this is at the moment right-sizing those premium services, we have temporarily suspended TheRide, and we've taken Holiday Ride and Night Ride and moved them over into the Flex Ride contract. And the MyRide funding has been expended or will be expended here shortly. And so that is going away. We also consolidated operations in part because of the pandemic, we brought everything in-house. And we also brought all of the software together into one. Our contractor was using a separate software. And our back office efficiency, we were able to expand our monitoring and actually have out on the street right now a new request for proposal for ADA service to contract the service back out, because we are going to be needing the drivers that are currently driving the paratransit service as fixed route bus operators come this August. So now what? And here's where we're looking for board direction. In the paratransit study identified several areas of potential improvement with policy areas for discussion. And the two to the right side of the screen are really they're in policy governance terms, I'd say they're pretty meansy, but they're also policy level, I think. And then a slightly new topic of mobility management, and we'll get to that last. So with eligibility, questions about eligibility. Right now we have, we rely on customers provided information, and we do not require any kind of assessment by our own occupational therapist or anything like that. And we, for the most part, have open eligibility, that if you are really just limited to not being able to use the fixed route when there's snow-covered streets, we still certify you as eligible for a ride. And what kind of eligibility from a policy level is the board looking for? You know, what and how do we make those choices? The stricter eligibility ensures that only the people that need the service get the service, but it can also be perceived as putting barriers to access. I should also mention that this would be tied into with a bus stop improvement program, working to make as much of the fixed routes system as accessible as possible. And so then the question comes from a policy level, where do we get to? And we get to my first quick poll of, from the board's perspective, stricter eligibility rules could allow, could save us up to $300,000 a year. To put that in context, that's a fixed route bus. That's more frequency on a fixed route line. That's possibly an express route or something like that. So, or it's Gold Ride, you know, that's currently suspended. So where would we want to go with that? And I'm just going to go across the top of my screen, if that's okay, and ask Jesse to start. If we have strict eligibility rules.
Brian, if I might interject, I just want to make sure before board members answer, do you understand what Brian means by eligibility? We're talking about for whom the service is open, who does it serve? And I wanted to make sure you had a chance to just make sure you were clear on what you were being asked.
And in an even broader sense, I should say, Gold Ride expanded sedan service and demand response service to people who are over the age of 65, regardless of their ability, you know, of their physical abilities to catch the fixed route, and regardless of their income. And so that's another eligibility rule to consider. And where should the focus be?
Can I ask a question just to make sure I'm going to answer properly?
Please.
With more relaxed rules, there's no real definition though of how to relax, what would be relaxed, to what degree it would be relaxed, right? It's just strict or not strict, and B is yet to be defined.
That's true.
Am I interpreting that correctly?
You are, yes. Strict would be to the letter of the law of what we're required to offer. And then the more relaxed rules, I would anticipate in a policy governance sense, would be something where you would give a broad overview for Matt to determine, and then Matt would provide an interpretation of what that meant.
Another way to think about this, Sue, would be strict eligibility would probably mean we turn more people down.
Right.
People who are able to get to the fixed route bus most of the time.
Yep.
People who, as Brian said, it would be strict eligibility means the service is more available to the people who really need it, but at the risk of changing expectations in the community who've had more relaxed rules for a while.
Are we looking at this as like, is our over/under line here ADA compliance, or is it somewhere, or is it a current? Like, I'm not sure where the line is between A and B.
So we are probably much more currently pre-pandemic and post-pandemic are much more on the more relaxed rules. We have a very open policy, a limited amount of proof you're required to offer to become certified. We do have denials, and we do deny people eligibility for the system, but it would, under no means would it be considered, and the paratransit study pointed this out, that in no way would ours be considered a strictly ADA only compliance. And of course, we can't go any more strict than ADA, and we wouldn't, but.
So I'm just wondering, for the purposes of this poll, though, I'm not sure. Like, so my thought is, you know, I don't want it to be ADA compliant only, but I'm open to the idea that it needs to be stricter than where we're at now. So do I choose A or B?
You know what, it occurs to me, I did not add a C. I did not add an other. And that's often been a choice. So why don't I just, if I can add other. And Jesse, I'll put you down for that as somewhere in between.
Okay.
We roll with it here. Kathleen.
I struggle with this. I know that if we were a little bit stricter, some of the perceived people who are maybe possibly taking advantage of the system. So in other words, if we had our own occupational therapist to review, or things like that, to review applications, could assist. And yet on the other hand, I know from personal experience, I have an ADA card. However, because I'm a stubborn old bat, I love fixed route. But once winter comes and cold weather that literally burns me when it gets to a certain temperature and takes me out, or the plows plow the sidewalk, but they plow it in because they've come along the street and I can't cross the street. I can tell you with certainty, even living where I live now, very close to the city center, I still have days that I am trapped in my home. So if I say stricter eligibility rules, I would be very concerned that there are many people out there who are similar to me, that I wouldn't want them to be able to fall through the cracks, that they still have a legitimate need. It just that they would ride fixed route more often. So I don't know that that helped anyone or you.
No, so I would interpret that, if I could, as strict eligibility, but in a strong appeals process, perhaps?
Yes, I could, yeah.
I can't talk right now, buddy. I'm talking to all these folks.
There's an activity that's optional.
Okay.
And it's something that I don't think we have all the supplies
Richard.
Well, I think like everyone else has had a lot of difficulty making a decision. I'm actually just going to make a decision. I'm going to go with B, because my assumption is that more relaxed rules doesn't mean that all rules are removed. So we would have some control as to how to get a little bit more strict rules or whatever we want in there to help quell any of these concerns or issues that we think may crop up.
Okay. Roger.
I would guess I'd sort of wear with Kathleen's strict eligibility rules with a strong appeal process.
Okay. Mike?
Again, this is difficult. I kind of lean in the direction that what Kathleen and Roger just said, but I guess I would interpret it a little bit differently with not only appeal process, but the ability to modify them somewhat, but still be stricter than today. So I guess that's a C.
Okay. Sue?
Sorry, C also.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I like everybody else, I'm struggling with it. You know, I'm a form follows function type of believer, and I think the rules should not exist for the sake of having rules, but to serve the purpose of the goals. So, I mean, I'm tempted to flip this back to you and say, you know, what's the purpose of either one of A or B? But if our goal to this is to be more inclusive, then I would vote B. But if we are trying to just get clearer definition because the way we run it now is not as efficient, I would vote A. So because I'm given the conversation between what I've heard you say and Matt in terms of what our overall policy goals are, I'm going to go with B.
Thank you. Raymond?
A, strict eligibility rules. And I'm under the assumption we can define those rules. So, but I feel pretty clearly or feel pretty strongly that we need to follow our own rules. Otherwise we open ourselves up to other liabilities. So how we define eligibility, I think is up to us. But once we define it, we stick to it.
There is a federal floor that we have to meet. But it is absolutely not the level of service we currently offer. We are well above the floor of ADA required service. Kyra?
I think I'm going to go with B. I think because, you know, $300,000 in cost savings is not super compelling to me, especially when I think about if we have stricter rules, that's also going to come with an added expense on staff, I assume, on who's going to enforce these rules, who's going to check that the riders are presenting evidence that is correct. So I think that also adds an expense that's unnecessary when I don't think the trade-off is going to be worth it to have stricter rules.
Okay, thank you. And Ryan?
B.
Okay.
So B.
Okay. And how am I doing on time? We've got 15 minutes. I'll try to speed this one up. So evaluating service standards, reducing our on-time performance allows for an increase in productivity. Currently, we have a 97% on-time performance rate. If we dropped it to 90 to 95%, the study estimated we could save $350,000 annually because with some, 1 out of every maybe 10 trips being late, we could fit more people into the schedule. However, we're then late for 1 out of every 10 trips. And that certainly doesn't doesn't bode well. The other thing that we have put on suspension at the moment is same-day service, both for seniors with that open eligibility and for anybody who rides a ride, and limited it now to a will call only for medical trips. So I believe the poll, there we go. I've got 2 questions here, and given the amount of time, I don't know that I want to go through everybody again, Matt, or do I want to get to the last question that I wanted to leave everybody with? Because these are very detail oriented, very, very close to the meansy aspects. And there's a much broader question is what I have next. So
I would say we do have another day. So we can circle back to anything we don't finish with today. And I sense the board will have a lot of unfinished questions in a few minutes. So maybe go to the question you think is most important to deal with today.
Okay. I would agree with that, because I think there's a lot of, in these questions that are currently on the screen, Brian, I think there's a lot of assumptions that go into these questions that need to be surfaced and discussed before we answer them as a board. So I would probably like to have some time to flesh through that and have everybody think about that and come back to it.
Great. In that case, I'm going to move over just briefly to say that we do have premium services. These are currently, the Gold Ride is on hold. The Flex Ride was expanded during the pandemic. Options about those could be expanded or pulled back. We could offer Gold Ride through a subsidy with taxis or with a partnership with Uber or Lyft. But ultimately, the question that I wanted to leave you with is actually the new piece, and talking more broadly about mobility management and what is it. And it's a term that has come to represent a formal definition of transportation strategy for paratransit service that focuses on the customer and their needs, and meeting those needs through a coordination with a variety of providers. It is evolving. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So it is noted here, but it serves a population that we've been talking about here with paratransit. And it looks beyond typical single solutions like we're going to have Gold Ride or not have Gold Ride, but rather, how can we offer a family of services to meet the needs of our community with the varying demographics and needs. There are over 60 different programs that are funded at a federal level that have transportation as an eligible expense. Think Medicare, Medicaid, Veterans Affairs, education, and how can we tie in to all of those? And so let me get to, well, of course, I can't find the question I was going to ask now. So the question really that I was hoping to leave you with, that I can't find now. Give me just a second. My apologies. Nope. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment, find the question, and just ask the question because it doesn't need to be on the screen. Just
May
a
I
moment.
ask a quick question while you're looking?
Yes.
We'll be discussing next retreat then fares and how they relate to, well, it relates to paratransit, but it also relates to fixed route, because I don't know if board members are aware, if they have an ADA card, they ride paratransit for $3 each way, but they can ride the fixed route for free. And I'm wondering if there's going to be discussion about what kind of about fares for people who hold ADA cards who ride fixed route and what income that could generate. I know that's probably a really unpopular opinion, but it's been something I've been giving a lot of thought.
I've added that to the parking lot, and we certainly can touch on it in the future.
And the only note I would make about that, Kathleen, is that actually we do get a fair number of requests for ADA eligibility certification to ride A-Ride, where their only focus is to be able to ride the fixed routes for free. And they say that to our eligibility person just outright. And so the question that I wanted to leave with in terms of paratransit and our overall service in this area, we have a wide variety that are currently on hold right now of transportation mobility pieces that were killing our budget. And as we move forward, do we want to be looking at contracted service, in-house service, self-developed, or partnerships with other agencies? And since these last 4 slides are new, I'll update them with Keith and make sure that you guys have them to consider going forward. But that's not a question I'm looking to get an answer to today. But what can we be focusing on for paratransit as we move into the future?
All right. So Brian, that's just a question to leave people with. You're not looking for any, okay. Okay, what I would suggest now, just as we enter our last few minutes, I'll make a couple of wrap-up comments, and then Eric, I'll turn it over to you to close out the meeting, if that works. So first of all, I'll say thank you for a good, half day, 3-hour session. How many of you, by show of hands, have a sensation of you would describe as either drinking from a fire hose, shell shock, or just generally being overwhelmed? Oh, good, good. All right. A lot of this stuff is familiar. We've touched on a lot of it before. So hopefully all those memories are there. There's a lot of detail. I'm sure you can tell the rabbit hole goes very deep on every single one of the issues. I think we've had a really good start. Thank you for your participation and everything you've contributed. We had a good conversation about goals, good conversation about, do we want to make the pie bigger? Do we want to live within our means, expand services? We're talking about the various things that we provide. And there certainly are more options than just property tax. To Eric's point, we can make the pie bigger. But that will probably, at some point, we'll hit a point where we say the pie can't get any bigger. So we'll have to prioritize within that limit. And Mike made a good observation when he looked back at one of Forrest's slides about productivity and how ridership didn't grow as fast as the hours of service. There is a natural question about, have we already hit some level of saturation? What's the point of diminishing returns? And to Eric's point, where are the tipping points in the future? At what point do we say, okay, we're done with this, we need to move on to something else? Excellent questions. I've also seen you guys, I really appreciate your participation in the polls and the discussion. And I can see, at first you totally went along with me when I told you could only pick 2. But by the end of it, you were pushing back and mixing and matching the various pieces of it. And that was fun to watch. Thanks for going along. I'm glad I went first. That tension is natural. Like Kathleen said, we want it all. We do. And our community will want it all. But to run a transparent process, we're going to have to grapple with the difficult and uncomfortable limitations that are out there. But hopefully, if we do that well, we can find a way to balance the needs, the wants, and what we have to work with. So that we'll continue working that over the next year. Next steps. So we have a board meeting next week. And you may choose as a board to have a further discussion with 7 days hindsight. What did you think about this first day? I'd be curious to know. We'll start planning the next day retreat. I think it's in March. We'll start planning that and start thinking about how we take this conversation and continue it to make it useful. I hope today was useful to you, it was to us, and where we need to refine it to keep it going. The retreats will just be, like I say, the end of the beginning. Before long, you're going to meet the consultants. And before long, we're going to start digging into even more detail than what we've presented here today. But with all the work we've done on paratransit fares and fixed route over the last few years, I think we're well set to get those things started. So thank you for your participation. Stay tuned. We'll have another half day in a month or so, and we'll be continuing to talk to you in between then and now. So with that, Mr. Chair, thank you all, and I turn it back to you for the remainder of the agenda.
Okay. Closing items, our next meeting will be March 3rd to conclude the retreat. And I think we all have that on our calendars. Again, thank you. I echo Matt's thank you for your time today and your participation in this. I know we're all very busy and have a lot of things going on, but this is a really important discussion and one we've been meaning to have for a long time. And one that's going to be ongoing. So we'll continue to sharpen our ideas, as the saying goes, iron sharpens iron. So I expect a robust discussion, going forward, and look forward to it. Having said that, we're on to section 3 of our agenda, the closing items. Topics for the next meeting, I think, are on your retreat agenda draft. And I guess at this point, are there any concluding comments from any other board members? Okay. If not, Keith, do we have anybody? Let's open it for public comment. Do we have anybody who's in the public square wanting to talk to the board?
We do not have any members of the public joining us today.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Rich?
moved.
Seconded by Sue. We'll just go through and one at a time, vote yes or no. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. So thank you. We're adjourned, and thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a good rest of the day and a good weekend.